Yes, but I'll quickly try and sort that out. Give me 2 seconds. Is there anybody joining yet? I'm going to enjoy it. Today we're chatting a bit about photography, insects, nature, everything that's usually happening on the channel. So if you've got questions, throw them down in the question section so that we can make sure I don't miss any of them. Send me a shock in the comments, then I know you can actually hear me. So that we know what's happening and if this is working. Just going to move the microphone closer for a moment to see if it works better. So what are you guys up to? Anything interesting? Any questions that you guys have? If there are any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Then we'll see what I can do. Sweet, I see that you guys can hear me. So if there's any questions, please drop it in the question section. Then I can answer them for you. Sweet. So just to start off with, while we're waiting for more people, if you're interested in ants or in nature at all, there's a very, very cool book. It's been out for, I think, 2 or 3 years now. Ants of Southern Africa. The Ant Book for All by Peter Slingby. This is my ants. Specifically, if you're into smaller nature and smaller insects and things, of everything so that you can see what's happening with a proper description on the other side of the book that you can identify into different sections, and each section is a different subfamily of ants that you can identify, and then you've got quite a. How do you safely take good macro photos of scorpions, preferably from a distance? The best thing to do is if you can set it up in such a way that the scorpion can't climb out and run away and run around. But if you do it either in a small box or then you at least know which way the scorpion can run out. If you do it in nature, the best would be that you contain it in such a way that it doesn't run away. And if you're taking it, and at night, if you shine a torch on it, usually I found that they sit still. That might be different from species to species, though. So you just need to check what happens. And yes, taking photos of scorpions safely is quite easy. It depends on what species you're photographing and how upset the scorpion is when you come across it, though. What are the best things to take pictures of at home during lockdown? That is a very good question because I've ran out of subjects. There are many, many different things that you can find around the house. You can take a plot/small farm. There's a lot of stuff outside that I can photograph. But if you can't go outside and you've got a smaller space in the city, what you can do is you can practice your photography with still life photography, taking photos of flowers, making up something like Skittles or anything that's going to challenge your ability that you currently have, so that you, in general, because all the photo theory that you learn by taking any photo is applicable to any other type of photography that you have. So if you practice at home with still life photography or with light painting or anything like that, it's going to assist you in getting better photos in general, so that you can see what's happening and that you can get a much better idea of how photography itself works. And the main thing is to learn how your camera works. If you're holding your camera, you shouldn't take it away from your eye and change settings and things. You need to know exactly where all your buttons are and how they work. Because if you know that, you're going to be a much better photographer and you're not going to miss any moment, whether you're taking photos of animals, people, nature, even in the city. If you're in the streets, everything that you're going to take photos of are going to come naturally because you know how to set your camera and how the camera works. So back to the book review while we're waiting for some more questions. The cool thing is that with a more difficult identification of the subfamilies, it gives you a nice color picture with all the different parts that you start of each family chapter. So yeah, if you're interested in ants and nature, you can definitely. Well, currently there's 2 lenses that I'm looking at that would be awesome, and then most a EOS R, either the EOS R or the R5. I don't know much about the R5 yet, but then on lenses, the best what's its name? The best lenses that I'll be looking at is the lower 100 mil macro that looks very, very good. And then also the Canon MPE 65 millimeters 1 to 5 times macro. I think that would be awesome to play around with to get photos of the tiny, tiny little insects. Flash setup with that would most probably, I'd continue with the 580 flash from Canon, the 580EX Mark II. Continue with that and my manual modifiers that I use, or my DIY modifiers, because they work excellently. Is there anybody else having issues with the video buffering? I see some. Seems like we're very unstable at this moment. It's possible. If you have. Okay, so people are having trouble with buffering. I wonder if it's on my side or just YouTube in general that's in overuse during lockdown. One of the other cool things that you can do during lockdown, even if you're staying in the city, is you can join the Lockdown Challenge app, or the Lockdown. Even if you're staying in the city, is you can join the Lockdown Challenge app, or the Lockdown Challenge for Birdlasser, and then you can see how many birds you can see during the lockdown. So the app looks quite simple like that. And then you just use your bird book and you add all the set amount of time. And it's actually quite fun. I'm standing at almost 50 species. So it's quite a fun challenge. What is a unique way of self-defense for a tarantula or a baboon spider? So it depends on if you're looking at old world or new world tarantulas. So how that's divided is that everything from the Americas are new world, and the ones from Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia are old world tarantulas. The difference comes in new world tarantulas has got urticating hairs that it can kick off and that burn you on the skin. And they mostly do that to avoid biting you, because producing venom is a very expensive way of defending itself, and it would rather use that venom to catch prey. Where your old world tarantulas and your baboon spiders, which comes down to the same thing in the end, is more likely to give you a threat posture and then to bite you, because they don't have urticating hairs. When they bite you, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. Because they don't have urticating hairs, they've got much more potent venom. So they do a bit more damage than your normal New World tarantulas. And you also see that the Old World tarantulas have got a tendency to be very badly tempered in comparison to the New World tarantulas. In the tarantula hobby, it is a normal thing that may hold them, where it's very rare that someone will pick up and it's highly has decided to walk off, and I can't find him yet. It was a he decided not to come back. So that's quite interesting. For those of you that saw on Instagram, I posted pictures of a black button spider. Give me one moment. So I've decided that it's a good thing to keep the black button spider for photos later on. And the glass and the reflection is busy beating me here. you will see in there at the bottom sits the black button spider, a very, very cool spider. I fed it a few times now, and it seems to be enjoying this enclosure. It's spun up everything with a very, very nice web. And feeding it in this is extremely awesome because you can actually see the spider catching the food, biting it, and then over the next, I would say, a few hours to 2 days, it sits eating on the piece of food. But that depends on the size of food that I give it. If I give it a small fly, it only lasts about an hour. If I give it a massive hissing cockroach, it will sit there for 2 or 3 days to consume the whole roach. So that is quite interesting. You can see it sitting right in that corner there where my thumb is now. It's still a small one. I want to grow it out to full size so that I can get proper feeding videos of it. My plan is to do a full feeding video of it, but I will do that in a time-lapse form so that you can clearly see how the spider eats it over the full course of the meal, and not just the catching it and holding it. But the time-lapse will most probably take me a few days to complete, to get the whole cycle. I did do a test on that, and I saw something very interesting. I usually thought that the spider just drinks up the juices and swells up. But as I watched through that short time lapse that I took of about 4 hours, I could see that the abdomen swells up and then goes down, and swells up and goes down, and swells up and goes down. And after a bit of research, I found that what they're actually doing is what their poison does, let's start there, is the poison breaks down the inside of the insect to become a full mush. So there's no structure left on the inside of the insect after it bit it. The same if it catches a mouse or a lizard. It breaks everything down except the bones inside, and it becomes basically a smoothie of whatever it's eating. So if you use the hissing cockroach example, the spider will be drinking a hissing cockroach smoothie from inside the cockroach, which is kind of gross. But what happens in the end is that the spider can't utilize all of it. And the same as an aphid, it needs to get rid of the extra fluid that it's taking in. So as it's drinking, it excretes the extra fluid and just retains all the juices that it actually needs. And I never realized that it actually happens where aphids do it in such a way that they flick off the unwanted liquid as they feed continuously, so they don't have swelling up and shrinking the whole time. The button spiders swell up and shrink the whole time while they're eating. So that's a very interesting thing that I learned myself in the last few weeks about button spiders. Just need a sip of Coke. Is there any other questions that you guys have? The only other spider that I can show you is Smurfette, but I don't know if that's a good idea because she's usually extremely upset. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll be back with a heavily upset tarantula. It is my favorite tarantula that I own. It is also the most upset and aggro tarantula that I own. So bit of both. There she sits. Smurfette is she did eat in this week, and she is very camera shy at this point, I see. But that is a very, very nice tarantula, beautiful blue tarantula. If you guys would like to see some photos, drop it in the comments or in the live chat. Then I will take some proper photos of her over the weekend and share them on Instagram with you guys. Interesting thing about keeping a tarantula like this is if you only have one door on the top or on the side, you run into trouble because you touch the door. That's why this design that I got from a guy in Pretoria, it's the best design that I've seen, and it's the only one that I trust with a spider like this at this point, because I not only have front access where I can open it at the front and feed her and clean the cage, I can also open it at the top and feed her from there. And this makes it so much easier because if she by any chance gets used to me feeding her from the top and cleaning from the front, I can swap it around a bit and I can clean from the top and I can feed from the front, making it much safer for myself to work with the tarantula, and it causes a lot less stress. And if you ever build a cage like this or you're looking into something like this, magnets. Magnets is the way to go because you don't have to worry about closing it or the spider being able to open it. This is quite securely in place that the tarantula won't actually open it by itself from the inside. I've had a tarantula that decided he likes climbing out, and he tried to climb out one too many times, and he managed to get his own legs stuck inside between the lid and the cage itself. And by the time I saw him, there was only a leg stuck between the lid and the cage, and the tarantula was running around at the bottom. And he ripped off his own leg out of frustration and panic, I presume. So yeah, that's why I've moved over to mostly magnets on all my cages to make sure that that can't happen again. Because some tarantulas just don't think. Yeah. Anything else that you guys want to know? If you want to use bird laser for photography, or for the for watching birds and keeping track of what you see, you need a bird book. Yes, I'm a Roberts fan. I know there's other people that like Sussel and Newman's and things. I prefer Roberts mostly because I know how to use it. I grew up with a Roberts in the house. The first bird book that I got was a Roberts, so I know this book. So finding a bird in it when I see it, and I don't know exactly what it is you're in this. And on that note, if you have a book that you use for identification, and it's a book that you've been using and you like the way that it's structured and how it works, I find it much easier to continue with the same series if you're upgrading to a new book than to move to a completely new series. So if you are using a Roberts, I would say it's better to continue using a Roberts than buying yourself a Newman or something else, because then you're going to get yourself very confused in finding the birds. And sometimes you need to find that bird quickly and identify it. Insects are mostly much easier because there's not so many and there's not 100 different books to choose from. But yeah, is there any other questions lying around that you've been thinking about? I will also share some photos of a brown button spider and explain the differences. And then the next live stream, I will try and have both the black button and the brown button, that we can compare them side by side. So it gives me that they've got black button spiders in the house, and when I check, it turns out to be brown button spiders. The difference being in America, North America, if you have a button spider, or like they call it a widow spider, with an hourglass at the bottom, then you've got a black widow. Where in South Africa, those rules don't apply as much, because in South Africa, Southern Africa, most of Africa, I believe, your black button spiders don't have any red markings on the bottom of the abdomen. But on the back of the abdomen, it's got either very red streaks or small red lines. You can't see it properly on this guy at this point. Too much glare. But there you can see that the back of the abdomen, focus, is completely red, and that is characteristic of the black button spiders in South Africa, where if you get a brown button spider, it will have the typical hourglass at the bottom of the abdomen, which makes it much different, and it's much easier to identify them in that way. Where your brown button spiders has got the hourglass at the bottom of the abdomen, and that's where the confusion comes in. People hear that if you see the hourglass in the bottom of the abdomen, it's a black widow spider. But that means it's a black widow spider in the Americas, not in Africa. In Africa, that is a brown button spider. Okay, there's two questions. During the lockdown, I have seen a fish eagle fly by a couple of times. Are they looking for new hunting grounds? My bird knowledge is not that great, but I would presume that they're either looking for new hunting grounds or that they are just moving between their territories, because fish eagles has got huge territories that they roam, often going through, or the territory often contains various dams and rivers and ponds that they will all hunt in, and that makes that they will continuously hunt between all of the different ponds and streams and things. And I believe it could be that they're just flying between them, and that they're more comfortable flying further with less traffic and less people around. So they are more comfortable in being around than staying in smaller areas. But don't take my word for it. I'm an entomologist, not a bird scientist. What is more dangerous, a black button or a brown button spider? Well, if you look at the medical facts, it's quite simple. The brown button spider will cause discomfort. It will hurt. It will be uncomfortable if it bites you, causing some muscle cramps and pains for a few days. Very bad symptoms. You will have stomach cramps, pains, and the black button spider will cause you to most probably end up in hospital if it bites you, with stomach cramps and potentially your heart stopping and you struggling to breathe because it's got a neurotoxic venom that affects all your muscles. So breathing could become an issue. Stomach cramps will become an issue. The interesting thing is that the black button spider is actually a spider in the world for which there is an antivenom, and the antivenom works very, very accurately, and it works very, very quickly. They say that if you are in very bad state with extreme symptoms and you get to a hospital and they administer the antivenom, it will take you within 15 minutes, all the symptoms will disappear if they administer the antivenom. You might need a second dose after 6 or 12 hours just to get the final symptoms subdued, but the antivenom works very, very well. What is my favorite animal sighting I've ever experienced in Kruger? Yes, this is a difficult one because I've seen too many. Okay, there's probably two that I'll put down as my favorite. The first one was at the end of 2013, December, when we went to Kruger, and as it happened, three brothers in the car. The brother with the directions fell asleep accidentally and took a nap for about 20 minutes. And the other two brothers decided this is the turnoff that they're going to take. It's this short loop of 2 kilometers. We're going to drive through that one. And as I woke up, I'm kind of frustrated. And they literally took the turn off that takes you on a 27-kilometer loop instead of a 2 or 3 or 5-kilometer loop. So now we're on this massive long dirt road, nothing happening, seeing nothing. And we just decided we're just going to keep on driving on it now because we're already like 25 minutes in on this road. So turning back now would take us the same amount of time as going forward. And as we drive down the road, there was a leopard coming on the road. We came around the turn, and as we went around the turn, the leopard came straight down the road, looking straight at us, and at the car went back into the bush. And we were still staring at the bush. The cool thing is that this was a blind leopard. It only had one working eye. The other eye was completely blue. I do have photos of that somewhere. Don't ask me where it is. I'll most probably have to go look for it for weeks to find it. But directly after that, even before we started driving, we still looked how the leopard is going into the bush. A hyena comes down and follows the path that the leopard walked exactly, sniffing the ground, following the leopard into the bush at the same place, and it goes off. That was a very cool sighting. The other extremely cool sighting that I had was we went there also in November, I believe it was, a group of friends, and as we get there, we're a bit late for the gate. So we kind of had to rush to get to the camp. And as we drive to the camp, we see, okay, there might be problems because we're not the only people going to camp. There are quite a few people. Got to camp, set up the camp. And as I usually do, I went and I checked to the grown male buffalo just this evening. And we got there just before everybody else. Sat there in the dark, waiting for the sun to come up. And as we started seeing light, we saw that there weren't 1 or 2 lions, but there were 22 lions lying around us. A full-grown male with his entire pride, busy feeding on the buffalo carcass. And we had the prime spot looking at them. And when we got there, they were actually still feeding and busy and running around and chasing off hyenas and things like that. So that was a pretty cool experience. But I'm quite sure that within the next few years, I'm going to have a few more that I can share with you guys. Any other questions? One moment. I've thought of something that I can show you guys. Any tips for shooting panoramics? The perfect panorama photo is when you keep the front element of your lens in exactly the same place without moving it. Then you don't get any stitching issues afterwards. And if you're doing panoramics of landscape, the best time to do it would be during a wind quiet day without any wind, so that your trees and your things aren't moving when you're taking the shots, because that's going to give you a lot of ghosting issues. And to fix ghosting issues becomes laborious and difficult. And then the general rule is that each photo that you take needs to overlap by at least a third. I like to overdo it and overlap all my photos by at least half. Then you know that there's good stitching and that there's enough space to put the stitch through without having to compromise on ghosting issues or on mismatch issues. And then you get a much clearer view. And if you can move your lens back on your tripod to be exactly the center point where your lens is turning, that your camera body turns around the tip of the lens, that's how you take the panorama. You get a much, much nicer panorama in the end. What type of venom does wasps have? Wasps, most probably, if I have to work off the top of my head here, would most probably be neurotoxic venom due to the burning and the stinging that you get without any necrosis or bleeding at this site. So I'd mostly go with it's a localized neurotoxic venom that stays localized because it's not put into the deep layers of skin, but only into the superficial skin layers. When will there be another video? No one knows. It's a very good question. Another thing that I've been taking photos of a lot during the last while are these guys, frogs. I've specifically seen 2 more this morning that I want to take photos of. Hyperolus murmuratus, or the common name is reed frogs. I just need to figure out where they are in the book. I have posted some photos of them, but I've found different color forms that make me extremely excited that I want to take photos of, because reed frogs are one of the coolest frogs to take photos of in Africa, with a lot of different color variations. Did I miss any? No, it doesn't seem like I missed any of your questions. Reed frogs, reed frogs, reed frogs. What is the common reed frog's name? 200 and something is all the reed frogs. I'll just go there. And there are so many different species of reed frogs. It is one of the missions that I would like to do, to take photos of each and every reed frog species in Africa. Well, let's start with South Africa, then we'll move to Southern Africa and expand from there. I'm not even finding the common reed frog. That is those are the painted reed frogs. Need to dive here under the screen to see what's going on. The ones that we get in Tzaneen, where I stay, are mostly those and the brown ones. And I might potentially have a tadpole that is busy growing up, that was flushed out of a water tank with lots of frogs. So I'm hoping it's one of those. It would be very cool if it is. I am taking photos of it every 2-3 days to get the full growth, what's its name? The full growth cycle. Reed frogs are not poisonous. Thank you for the question. And as you can see, Hyperolus murmuratus or Hyperolus murmuratus has got 3 different species that occurs throughout the coast or the eastern parts of South Africa and Southern Africa. The painted reed frogs to the north, in the center, I don't know which one that is, and at the bottom another species. I have only found the black and yellow striped ones in South Africa and the brown ones. They're usually a tiny small frog, and they've got very good acrobatic skills. I have tried taking photos of one jumping for over 3 hours the other day, and yes, I were unsuccessful because they give you no warning to when they're going to jump. They just shoot off. But I'm sure if I stay longer and look exactly what happens before they jump, specifically during slow-mo video, you can learn a lot, because then you can see how an animal reacts in those moments before it jumps, or if you want to take a photo of a cobra striking or a spitting cobra spitting its venom. It's quite easy, because then you can actually see in the split seconds before it's going to spit what it does. Does it pull back its head? Does it slightly go forward? Does it slowly start opening its mouth? And anything like that gives you a clue, gives you that slight advantage to get the shot that you want, which makes life so much easier. Any other questions? At this point, it's becoming winter, so the insects and everything is becoming less and less and less. The one thing that I am looking for at this point, and I've seen one of them dead this morning, but I want live photos of it, is a red driver ant male, Dorylus. Interesting fact about Dorylus males. I'm just trying to find a male to show you. There they are. Interesting fact about these males are that they only fly when the temperatures are below 16 degrees Celsius. If it's above 16 degrees Celsius, then they won't fly. You don't see them at all. But the moment it's 16 degrees Celsius, they start flying, and most of your other insect species stop flying. So as an entomologist, there's a thing that we do to collect different insects and to see what occurs in the field. It's called a light trap. So you put up a very strong light in front of a white cloth that you hang up, and then you can pick off the insects that you're studying on from the cloth. There's many different variations, from small tents of white cloth. Small tents of white cloth that you can use with the lights inside. Tubes with a light inside, a cloth tube with a light on the inside that you can use. I'm lazy, so I just use the basic white cloth with a bulb on the front, and let the insects sit on the back of that. So when the insects fly, they come and sit on the white cloth. But as an entomologist, everybody always wonders when they start and they do their first light job, when do I turn off the light? When is it too cold? When is it too hot? But with experience, you learn that the moment that that first red driver ant male lands on top of your cloth, you turn off your light and you go to bed, because then it's too cold for anything else to fly. Nothing interesting is going to come to your light. It's time to go and sleep so that you can be up early tomorrow morning and look for the stuff that's up during dawn and flying around during dawn. So that's very interesting. How do driver ants mate? Because females don't fly. Yes, that's correct. The females never fly or leave the nest. And I think it goes as far as that the females don't even have wings at any stage of their life. That's the queens, not just the normal females, because all the ants in the nest is female. But the queens don't develop wings. So how they mate is they work on a super colony basis with the groundworks of what is it called? It's a multiple queen system. There's a specific word for it. But they've got many different queens that stay together in one nest. And if they raise a queen, what usually happens is there's a driver ant male that flies around during night. He finds another nest, and then he goes and mates with the females inside. And that is how they mate. So the males go to polygynous. Yes, thank you very much, Richard. That is the correct word. So the males will fly between the nests and fertilize the females and mate with them. And that is how they mate. So the males will actually fly to another nest, enter the nest, and go mate with those females. I believe that it does sometimes happen that he gets lost and he ends up in his own nest, and then he mates with them. But clearly, if that does happen, there is no, what is it called? No detrimental effect of him basically mating with his own sisters. How that happens genetically, I have no idea. So that is very interesting. What is my greatest insect or reptile find? Insect, you'll have to be more specific, because anything rare or interesting that I haven't seen before is very cool. Most probably, I'll say the guy that I wanted to show you that's running around here somewhere in my house, because he decided to stroll off while I weren't looking. So I'll get photos of him and share that with you guys. The most interesting reptile find that I've had, I'll have to say, is the vine snake. Vine snakes closely related to, or I think it's closely related to the boomslang. Extremely venomous species. I've only found one in my entire life. And it was a heavily upset specimen, but I did get a few photos of it. But just seeing that snake actually being upset was quite interesting. I did not upset it myself, so don't worry. What happened is we were working in plantations, and as we were driving out after the day's work, this snake was lying in the middle of the road. So we pulled off, I got out, and I went to take some photos of it, but it was so upset with all the cars coming past it the whole time, because I believe it came down to lie in the tar road and heat itself up so that it can continue, and snakes are on. And as I were taking photos of it, there was a car that came past and it struck at the car and everything. And after I finished taking a few photos of it, I decided I have to move this guy off, because someone's going to come past and not see him, or on purpose drive over him, because they don't understand snakes. So I took a long piece of reed that I found directly next to the road. I basically touched him twice with it, and he shot into the bush, and we didn't see him again. So that was one of the coolest finds, because firstly, it's a rare snake. And I think it's more rare due to the fact that you don't low numbered. Because if you see photos of those snakes in nature where people didn't disturb them and they're exactly like they were, and they take a photo of them, spotting it even in a photo, if someone points it out to you, is extremely difficult. That's why they're called vine snakes. They look exactly like a vine. Yes, the driver ants don't inbreed for some reason, because I don't know. some genetic inhibition or something that prevents them from inbreeding with their own siblings for some reason. Don't understand how that works. I'm not a geneticist. I'm an entomologist. I play with the insects, not their genetics. Is there a last question for the day before we end off? If you're wondering what I'm looking at, I'm trying to see if the weevil that I found decided to go up on the roof again, because that's where I found him this morning, sitting on the roof. Then I started to take him down, put him on my table, and he vanished. But he has not found his way back up to the roof yet, because I know he's going to end up there most probably by tonight again. So yeah. Then for those people in South Africa, you should have a wonderful long weekend. And remember to explore, discover, and share what you're discovering. If you've got questions about something that you find, post the photos to Instagram and tag me in it and ask your questions, and I'll get back to you and answer your questions. And next time, if you've got questions, drop them down in the comment section. Have I ever been bitten by a spider before, and what type? It's a very difficult question, because you're asking while I were playing with it or by accident. Because I've never been bitten by a spider, never been stung by a scorpion playing with it, but I had a very unpleasant experience. You get headache, you feel nauseous, and it makes quite a bad sore on your back or wherever it bit you. So that is quite unpleasant, but no tarantula, no interesting spider like that has bitten me before, officially. So yeah. But guys, then you should have a wonderful weekend further, and I might be doing this again tomorrow. I might tomorrow, if my internet is working with me, go outside and do the live stream from there, and try and see what I can find outside and share with you guys. What's the most interesting find that you found since the lockdown? The extremely cool beetle that I want to show you guys, but I can't find him because he decided he's camera shy or something. Doesn't like people. So when I find him, I will share photos on Instagram as well as on Instagram Live. But yeah, next time I will contain him better than just putting him on the table. That's most probably the lesson out of this. But yeah, then you guys should have a wonderful weekend. I hope to see you guys in all the next live streams, and then you should chill it out, stay safe, stay home. If you go out, wear a mask, do all that fun stuff. Have a good one. Cheers.